Here's your host, Alex Garrett.
And a very good Friday to you guys here on Alex Garrett Podcasting. By the way, yesterday was the 2-year anniversary of Notre Dame Cathedral spire going up in flames. You could check a blog I have about that, about the Disney version of Hunchback of Notre Dame at alexgnyc.com. I have friends in the studio, so I want to get a shameless plug in there. But really, I'm so glad to have my next two guests, because you know Zach Miller. He's been on here, 4 or 5 times, it feels like, Zach. So thanks for coming back from New York Truck Stop.
Oh, absolutely. I think this is my 5th. I think this is my 5-timers club.
And we've got another special guest in the studio, Arthur Miller. You're also part of New York Truck Stop. How are you, Arthur? Thanks for finally coming up.
I'm great. Thanks for having me, and it's an honor to be with you.
So you guys deal with trucking. You also deal with traffic stops and traffic violations. And that's why I have you on today, because I heard on New York One recently when they were talking to NYPD Commissioner Shea, are you going to dismantle the traffic stop unit? Like, is this going to be something where police officers don't do traffic stops? I guess my first question is, how did we go from, do you know why I pulled you over, to literally fatalities at a traffic stop? Like, how did we get there? And is it blown out of proportion? Is there really a big amount of fatalities that are reported? Or what are you guys seeing out there in the traffic stop world that causes people to say maybe cops shouldn't be doing this?
It's an awful mix with the way policing is done, and obviously media, and then of course using the traffic stop as a way to stop people and see what people are about. I mean, the real problems with particularly gun violence are more, first of all, suicides is a huge number. And then you have in certain communities, especially with COVID, there's a lot of lawlessness. But obviously a police officer with a gun, encountering an unarmed person, and especially if it's a person of color, Black or Hispanic, that gets news, as it should, because it's entirely unequal. Why does it seem that people of color are singled out more often, and then why are there sometimes bad consequences? So it's very dramatic, obviously, but thankfully it's not more than it is, and I think police are trying to do better, but it's the tension is there.
But there is a fear in these communities that any time a person of color gets pulled over for a traffic stop, that it might end their life, and that's a very real fear and trauma that the community has to deal with.
Well, let's take a step back. The U.S. Constitution prohibits unreasonable searches and seizures.
Isn't that it's Amendment 4? I think it is, right?
Yeah. So I mean, it's basically against the law to stop someone on the street and say, "Show me your papers." And when there's some kind of violation, then obviously it's a little easier, and that's been a huge problem. And they call it stop and frisk, and it was really heavily used in New York, and especially in other urban areas, as an opportunity to stop people. In other words, if someone was seen smoking or had pot, now they're making that legal, or even on occasion jaywalking, then it was an excuse to stop them. Once you have a police and an individual and a non-police encounter, then the police have the opportunity to sort of see what they're about. If they get ID, they can look for the records. Maybe they pat them down. Do you have drugs on you? Things like that. So that's sort of the essence of stop and frisk, and it was certainly intimidating in certainly in areas of high crime and violence and things like that. Having police have that kind of presence, certainly it was a law enforcement tool. It doesn't mean it was acceptable. In a car, it's very easy because when someone commits some sort of traffic violation, then same thing. They get to stop that car. We'll run your records. Have you been drinking, sir? Do I smell pot in the car? That leads to other consequences. So unfortunately, and the numbers bear this out, the police will go in certain high profile areas, and they'll stop to look at people that they think may be of interest. Doesn't make it right. This is the way it's been carried out. So traffic stops are being misused.
Now, I know you have the law office. You have the law office of Arthur Miller, and I know this deals with traffic. So, Arthur, how do you help people? And maybe it's a little different than the traffic stop itself, right? That you deal with more of the violations than the actual stops, or do you deal with both?
Well, it can actually be both. The issue of a stop usually comes up where it's if it leads to something else. So, in other words, let's say someone was stopped, and then let's say they were stopped for speeding, and then the officer then concluded that maybe the person had been drinking. So that then leads to a charge of driving while intoxicated. So that becomes then a criminal charge. In New York and many other states, not all, most traffic violations have been sort of decriminalized. So like a number of the protections that you would have if you were in a criminal proceeding are gone. And particularly in New York City, the traffic violations are handled as an administrative proceeding, where you have almost no protection as you would under criminal law or even civil law. So it becomes relevant again. Was it a proper stop? Was it a proper constitutional seizure of the person that then leads to the other consequences? So if there was a crime and you can show that it was an improper stop, then you get the crime charge tossed. So in that instance, it becomes important. But most traffic stops don't lead to that. They usually lead to some kind of fine, and in some places there's an opportunity to conference the case and reduce them. And in others, you still have to have a hearing. So these are tools, and sometimes you see them in more places. Certainly around the New York area, there are certain places, police just sort of sit. They'll get the speeders, or they go on assignment to make out a certain point. Let's say in the morning on a certain day, look for people who don't yield the right of way to pedestrians and things like that. So they'll stop whoever they see. If there are other consequences, though, that then becomes a problem.
Zach, I wanted to get to you because our generation kind of is utilizing any way to disband the cops from anything as a reason for a bigger picture to disband the cops. So do you feel like people are now utilizing this whole remove traffic stop cops as a bigger thing to end all cops?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think that's definitely a big component about it in terms of, the defund the police movement. And I think, you and I certainly had this conversation. I believe we even had it on one of your podcasts, which is the message should be to rethink policing. Clearly, as Arthur mentioned, the way they go about these traffic stops is not really good policing, and it must be done better. And I think retraining would be better off. I also think, though, that, the police are, for lack of a better term, low-hanging fruit, right? So it's easy to complain about, these terrible tactics that the police use and a lot of the damage that it causes, and justified to talk about it and complain about it. The problem is a lot of these issues go above the police. Yeah. You're talking about traffic stops as a means for municipalities to collect revenue. It's essentially tax collection. And it's a really intrusive, regressive, inefficient way of doing tax collection. So I think if people were outraged about the tax collection component of this, we'd actually see some really good changes instead of debating who is the one doing the stop, whether it be the police or a regulatory agency like DOT or cameras or even citizens. I think there's a bigger conversation to be had. And I personally am frustrated that we're not really having it.
Well, let me ask.
Right, oh, I'm sorry.
Well, this is a toss up to both of you, and then you can add to it. I just think the fact that also one side says it's refusal to, obey the cops or refuse to whatever to comply. That's an argument I hear from only one side. Do you think if both sides maybe did say, yeah, that you should also comply with the cops, that would help too? Or do you think that's a damaging narrative? Either one of you can answer that one.
It's a mixed bag. People say, in many instances, even with let's say surveillance and things like that, if you're not doing anything wrong, you shouldn't have to worry. But there've been so many bad consequences. People shouldn't look at police and say, oh my God, what do they want now? Or, am I in danger because I'm having an interaction? So I don't think that sort of making the police just sort of stop people at random has been a good thing. I don't think it's good for the police. I have to think that their time could be better spent on other things. And, a lot of it is policy. Like I mentioned, looking, being assigned, looking for people who fail to yield to pedestrians, that's, it's not necessarily an effective use of time. Thankfully, overall crime, in many instances is not terrible. So, we've gotten away from the notion of the beat cops and out on patrol. And too many times they're assigned for, for something, specific task, where they can just sort of surveil people and stop people and see what they're about. And I don't think that's good for anyone.
Arthur, you're going to
and I think also... Oh, no, Alex, go ahead.
Well, Arthur was going to add to a little bit what you had said before that last question. I don't know if you still have that in your thought process, but you were in the middle of a thought when I asked that last question.
No backseas. I don't remember where we were.
That's okay.
But Alex, I do think that, we've seen enough instances of people not obeying the cops, getting arrested without incident. We've seen police be able to de-escalate rather serious situations without violence. And even this past week, we saw a really between a police officer and a military lieutenant. And it's just like, if someone in the military who is trained in all the ways that the military is trained in, who deals with, the 24/7 stress that the military deals with, is still sort of, has the adrenaline running and is mistreated by a cop, has trouble, quote unquote, complying. It's very difficult to have a regular citizen, be able to handle that. It is just such a tense, stressful situation that we put people in. And yes, there's that part of it. It's just like, you should comply and follow the orders. But on the other hand, it's such a volatile situation. We're really asking a lot of people in that instant.
Arthur, you have a diverse client base. So what are they telling you? And do they tell everything about the experience they had at a traffic stop to you, or what is their interaction about it with you?
For the most part, the traffic stops are usually, they go off without incident. And I certainly think there are people who are targeted. Especially you see young males of color, particularly if it's late at night or driving a nice car or something like that. They seem to be unduly stopped. But again, most times there've been no problems. It's just really the unfortunate few, and I really haven't been involved in situations where they escalated, because most people, I think, feel obviously they have to be calm and respectful, and the police officer does have the gun, and and on some level you got to put yourself in the police officer's perspective. They don't know who they're dealing with when they stop somebody. What if that person was a fugitive or carrying contraband and had a gun themselves? So they have to maintain control. So there's this huge power thing going on, and like I said, it's very difficult to have to put police in these situations to begin with, and it's sort of gotten out of control. But this is the situation we have now. So how do we sort of de-escalate that in general?
That's why I want to bring you guys on. Do you think ultimately ending cops at traffic stops is going to solve the issue? Because then you're going into this whole, well, if you only do cameras, then you're secretly monitoring citizens too, so you can't win there either.
Yeah, I mean, and I've got a huge, issue with that. So first of all, I've gotten involved with a lot more camera issued tickets, whether it's driving in the bus lane or red lights and speeding camera tickets and things like that. And there are a lot more nuances because that goes against the car. So somebody else can, if the notion of what happens after you get a ticket. If somebody just gets a $50 or $100 ticket because the camera went off, you say, all right, no big deal, I'll pay it. But what if you don't get that notice? What if you get lots of notices? What if somebody else? What if you moved? So your address changed, and then somebody ultimately, if the registration is suspended because if people aren't paying the fines, then you're the only way to punish them is to suspend the registration. So then maybe somebody's driving around with a suspended registration. So are you going to have a non-police officer try to stop that car and find out what's going on, or are you going to have a police officer? So maybe we'll reduce the number of traffic stops, but the young man who was just killed in Minneapolis, I think that was because his registration was expired. So here in New York, we're putting in, so the argument of putting more cameras up to look for cars that have expired registrations, aren't we asking for the same kind of thing? It's still going to be an altercation.
Yeah, and I also, I mean, first of all, I don't think DOT should be doing it. I don't think a regulatory agency should be in that business. You know, they should not be handling this from all sides. I do have a lot of problems with the cameras. But it's also, you know, in New York City specifically, it's very disingenuous because the city council, they want to criminalize driving. I mean, they are as anti-drivers as you can imagine. So you have a city council that essentially treats drivers as criminals and then has the audacity to turn around and say, but we can't have the police do it. It's like, you literally think these people are criminals. Like Alex, I think that goes back to your point earlier of, you're just kind of throwing it on the defund the police movement.
Yeah.
But your intention is something else entirely. It's not really about better policing. You have other stuff going on here.
Thank you for saying that. And that's an argument that I've made many times, is that you have to look at who really wins and who really gains. People that push some of these arguments are the ones who stand to gain. There's huge money to be made if you have automated ticket generation like you do with the speed cameras. I mean, the city's making millions and millions of dollars off of that. Obviously, the companies that sell these cameras are making millions and millions of dollars. And I don't even believe that they're really producing safety, which is something that these advocates keep saying. The fact that accidents are most often related to speeding has gone down is not because of the cameras just by themselves. It's because they've reduced the speed limit. They've been telling people if you're caught speeding, you're going to get a ticket. So when it's a camera ticket, if you really don't care, you're going to rack up a bunch of tickets, and then whatever. So it's a camera ticket is issued after the fact. It's that the notion of getting stopped by the police officer, that's the one that has more impact. So if you're going to just issue more camera tickets and then ultimately look to hurt the driver, you're still going to be getting police involved.
So how do drivers adapt? This is my whole point, adapting with Alex. How do drivers adapt to all of this? I would say the fear of a traffic stop, or the fear of even getting camera now. So how should drivers adapt, and how should truckers adapt? I mean, you talk with them daily, so how are they adapting to all of this?
Yeah, it's truckers generally, from as a general matter, it's a profession. Most of them try to follow the laws because, for one thing, the penalties can be more onerous for them if they're driving a commercial vehicle, and for another thing, if they get too many tickets or points, they can't work. If they can't work, they're not earning money. So it's not like they can just switch to riding a bicycle. That's their job. So so they're far more cautious. And in fact, the safety rating has gotten a lot better, I think, for drivers and commercial companies. But I think one thing that's not really talked about enough is sort of working the other side of the equation. And that's one of my complaints about Vision Zero is that sort of mathematically you're never going to get to zero if you're only talking about what drivers have to do. You need to really make sure that people are better educated. I think education about why speed is not a good thing has helped as opposed to the cameras. I think if you educate people about why you have to follow traffic rules, about staying out of blind spots and things, certainly make sure cyclists and moped riders also have better rules, better safety training. Again, to me, tickets are the sticks. You need more carrots. One guy I remember reading a few years ago in England even said, and then they issue points for camera issued speeding violations. Said, why not have a sign up and a camera saying everyone who passes this way each week, if you go at the speed limit, you're enrolled in an opportunity to win a certain cash prize each week. So it's almost like an incentive. Everybody who follows the rules will be in a lottery, and we'll pick one winner each week. And maybe that kind of positive reinforcement will be better than getting the ticket and threatening their license.
Oh, yeah, I mean, that's really what it comes down to.
So I say, it's education. It's making people feel that they're more invested in traffic safety instead of being beat down, and you just sort of maybe some more carrots rather than sticks.
It's funny, they talk about the driverless, like the automated self-driving car. I just think we're going to have a driverless city pretty soon if they keep all this up. And that's why I want you guys to come back, because you can update us on what the council's doing and even ways to fight back, if you will.
I mean, personally, I think this driverless car thing is we're a long way to, just to close that gap. You're going to have assists, of course, but you're not going to just completely change that culture. I mean, there have been way too many accidents with the testing automated cars, and the reality is if you're behind the wheel of a car, you should have some control. The story I like, think of if I forget his name, Captain Sullenberger with the airplane that crashed in the Hudson. He was able to override the computers and save the day. If he wasn't able to do that, it would have crashed because the computers didn't know what to do in that situation. So computers are tools that work for humans, and it shouldn't be the other way around. And I think that's something we really have to deal with.
Yeah.
Zach, what about you? How can drivers and how are people talking to you about adapting to what they're seeing in the city right now?
I definitely have to agree with Arthur about a lot of the training and education. I think that the driver training has really lapsed significantly in the past couple of years, even decades. First of all, I think people should have refresher classes. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't think you should just be able to get a license at 17 and literally be able to drive the rest of it. Like, it's like, come on, you need refresher. You need to keep testing yourself. New regulations. Right? Yeah, I mean, you have new regulations come up, new technologies come up. You talk about adapting. You have to be able to adapt to that, and you have to prove aptitude in it. I also think a big pet peeve of mine is the apps, the reliance on the GPS. And look, I'm guilty of it too. But before you go to where you're going, look it up on a map. Mm-hmm. Just have a feel, have an idea of where you're going to go before you go out there, and you let the computer sort of dictate, and you don't pay attention to your surroundings the way you should. I think that's really a big thing. That would be my advice to drivers.
And my position on all this, just to tie it all in, is that I think that you also should somehow balance, maybe keep the traffic stops, but just do training on both ends. Like maybe the cops need to have a little more retooling, but maybe the driver himself or herself also needs to be told, hey, don't be that afraid of this. You can just act normal. I don't know. I guess it's human instinct, but I would just say there's a way we can balance it both out for both parties at a traffic stop. I just think if you pull the cops from one thing, you're going to end up saying, well, now we can pull them from everything. And I think that's the dangerous road to go down. But Zach and Officer Miller, thank you both for joining me. New York Truck Stop will be airing tomorrow, by the way, on AM 970 The Answer at 2 p.m. And you can listen to them there. But NewYorkTruckStop.com, is that right?
Yep, NewYorkTruckStop.com.
And that's their same Twitter handle. I'm Alex Garrett. Thank you guys for joining me. And remember, we are always adapting. Talk to you soon.